Honorable Vice President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the Supreme Being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implication into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the Vice President.
Honorable Senators, I wish to advise that the President of the Senate, Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo, is currently acting as President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Honorable Senators, I have granted leave of absence to Senator Jennifer Raffoul and Senator Torel Shrikissoon, both of whom are out of the country. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency the Acting President, Christine Kangaloo. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, by Her Excellency Christine Kangaloo, Acting President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Mr. Gavin Simonet. Whereas the President of the Senate has temporarily vacated her office to act as President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore I, Christine Kangaloo, Acting President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Gavin Simonet, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 11th of September 2018 and continuing during the acting appointment of Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo as President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 10th day of September 2018. To Mr. Elton Prescott, SC. Whereas Senator Jennifer Raffoul is incapable of performing her duties as a senator by reason of her absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore I, Christine Kangaloo, Acting President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Elton Prescott, SC, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 11th of September 2018 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of the said Senator Jennifer Raffoul, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 10th day of September 2018. To Mr. Ronald Duke. Whereas Senator Torel Shrikissoon is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore I, Christine Kangaloo, Acting President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Ronald Duke, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 11th of September 2018 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of Senator Torel Shrikissoon, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 10th day of September 2018. Honorable Senators, Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Garvin Simonet, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, and will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Elton Prescott, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Ronald Duke, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge its responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, upon which I am about to enter.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives, petitions, papers.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome all my colleagues back. I'm sure we're all eager and raring to go. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper and supplemental order paper in the name of the Minister of Finance. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Mayaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2007. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 16th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 3rd session, 2017 to 2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission for the financial years 2012 to 2015. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the National Library and Information System Authority for the year ended September 30, 2011. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Fair Trading Commission for the year ended September 30, 2017. The consolidated financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago National Petroleum Marketing Company Limited and its subsidiaries for the financial year ended March 31st, 2017. The reports of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Public Transport Service Corporation for the years ended September 30, 2006, 2007, and 2008. The audited financial statements of Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company Limited for the financial year ended September 31, 2017. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the San Fernando City Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2005. The report of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to the progress of the proposals to restructure CLICO, BAT, and CIB for the quarter ended June 30, 2018. The audited financial statements of the Vehicle Management Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the financial year ended September 30, 2014. The audited financial statements of National Flour Mills Limited for the financial year ended December 31, 2017. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 12th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, 3rd Sessions, 2017 to 2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the National Training Agency for the financial years 2008 to 2011. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 7th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd Session, 2017 to 2018, 11th Parliament, on an examination into the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs with specific reference to follow up to the first report on the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee and current expenditure related to official travel to Tobago. And the ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 10th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd Session, 2017 to 2018, 11th Parliament, on an examination into the inventory control and internal audit systems within the public service, with specific reference to follow up to the 3rd and 4th reports of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. Mr. Vice Chairman, I thank you.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the 11th report of the Public Accounts Enterprise Committee, 3rd Session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the National Maintenance, Training and Security Company Limited, MTS, for the financial year 2008 to 2016. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the 9th report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, PAAC, 3rd Session, 2017 to 2018, 11th Parliament, on a follow-up examination of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the committee's 1st and 3rd report, as well as the Ministry's statement of expenditure as at October 2017.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed in the order paper in my name. The Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Regulations 2018 and the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Regulations 2018. I thank you.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed on the order paper in my name. The Animals Importation Control Amendment Regulations 2018. I thank you.
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The Annual and Administrative Report of the Port of Spain Corporation for the period 2016 to 2017. The Ministerial Response of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. Third session, 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on the inquiry into the adverse health effects of fireworks. Thank you.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The annual administrative reports of the Ministry of Trade and Industry for the fiscal years 2016 and 2017. The response of the Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited, ETEC, to the 9th report of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an inquiry into the operations of the Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited, ETEC. Thank you.
Government business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper. In the name of the Vice President of the Senate, the Attorney General, the Minister of National Security, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Planning and Development, the Minister of Health, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Public Administration, the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, and in my own name. The response of the Statutory Authority Service Commission to the 8th report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Statutory Authority Service Commission, the SASC. The response of the Personnel Department to the 10th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an examination into the inventory control and internal audit systems within the public service, with specific reference to follow up to the 3rd and 4th reports of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. The response of the Service Commission Department to the 6th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an examination into the Tobago House of Assembly with specific reference to accountability and transparency, inventory control, internal audit, subhead 02, goods and services, subhead 03, minor equipment purchases, subhead 04, current transfers and subsidy, and subhead 09, development program, consolidated fund. The response of the Personnel Department to the 6th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an examination into the Tobago House of Assembly with specific reference to accountability and transparency, inventory control, internal audit, subhead 02, goods and services, subhead 03, minor equipment purchases, subhead 04, current transfers and subsidies, and subhead 09, development program consolidated fund. The ministerial response of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs to the 8th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 2nd session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament on the examination of the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on a special audit of the Public Transport Service Corporation, the PTSC. The ministerial response of the Ministry of National Security to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an inquiry into the adverse health effects of fireworks. The ministerial response of the Office of the Prime Minister to the 7th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament on an inquiry into the status and implementation of the recommendation of the 2015 report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Diversity, the Environment and Sustainable Development on the examination of programs and services which provide support to victims of domestic violence. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Planning and Development to the 9th report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commission and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into certain aspects of the operations of the Chaguaramas Development Authority, the CDA. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Health to the 8th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11 Parliament on an examination into the Ministry of Education with specific reference to inventory control, internal audit, Subhead 02, Goods and Services, Subhead 03, Minor Equipment Purchases, Subhead 04, Current Transfers and Subsidy, Subhead 09, Development Program, Consolidated Fund and Infrastructure Development Fund. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Education to the 12th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the National Training Agency for the fiscal year 2008 to 2011. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Education to the 8th report of the Public Administration and an Appropriations Committee, 2nd session 2016-2017, 11 Parliament, on an examination into the Ministry of Education with specific reference to inventory control, internal audit, Subhead 02, Goods and Services, Subhead 03, Minor Equipment Purchases, Subhead 04, Current Transfers and Subsidies, Subhead 09, Development Program, Consolidated Fund and Infrastructure Development Fund. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Administration to the 10th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on an examination into the inventory control and internal audit systems within the public service, with specific reference to follow up to the 3rd and 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. A green paper on the draft national policy for persons with disability and the action plan. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries to the 8th report of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, into an inquiry into the operations of the National Quarries Company, NQCL, and to determine its effectiveness in fulfilling its mandate by maintaining quality products and stability of supply. And finally, Mr. Vice President, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries to the 13th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, 3rd session 2017-2018, 11 Parliament, on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of Union Estate Electricity Generation Company, UEEGCL, for the financial year 2008 to 2015.
Senator the Honorable Alison West.
Reports from committees.
Senator the Honorable.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to present the following report as listed on the supplemental order paper in my name. The interim report of the Joint Select Committee established to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018, 3rd session 2017 to 2018, 11th Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Urgent questions?
Senator Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. To the Minister of Education. In light of reports that the Infants Department of the Fanny Village Government Primary School has been officially closed by the Point Fortin Borough Corporation's Health Department, can the Minister inform the Senate of the urgent measures being taken to accommodate the affected students?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. The Fanny Village Government Primary School was destroyed by fire some time ago, and as a result, the school has been housed at the Village Community Center. However, because of some defects with respect to termites and toilets, the infant department has been ordered closed. Officials of the Ministry of Education visited the school, and another visit was made to the burnt-out school, the former burnt-out school. It was decided that there are 3 classrooms that were not affected as a result of the fire, and the all clear has been given for those classrooms to be refurbished to house the students. I have been told that that refurbishment will be done in a few days, so the students in the 4-1 classes can be accommodated as soon as possible. Thank you.
Next question, Senator Mark.
To the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Minister of...
In light of reports that 2 councillors were evicted from their offices due to a lack of funds at certain regional corporations, can the Minister state the steps being taken by the Ministry to urgently provide financial assistance to the affected corporations?
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, and I want to thank Senator Mark for the question. Mr. Vice President, this matter is receiving urgent attention, and I want to repeat, this matter is receiving urgent attention of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. We are liaising with the Ministry of Finance, Budget Division, and we intend to bring a swift resolution to the affected councillors. Mr. Vice President, I want to say, for the record, last week, Monday, I have met with all the mayors and chairmen, and this was brought to my attention. And prior to that, I have been liaising with all the mayors and chairmen to find out whatever problems they have. And this was brought to my attention. I have liaised with the Minister of Finance, and we are bringing it to a swift resolution, Senator Mark.
Senator Mark.
Yes. Go to the next question. Yes, to the Honourable Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. In light of growing public concerns over government's decision to shut down the operations of the Petrotrin refinery, can the Minister inform the Senate whether it is the intention of the government to publish all the reports which assisted the government and the Petrotrin board in arriving at its decisions?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, let me first go on record by saying this government didn't take the shutdown of the refinery lightly. Every aspect was analyzed before we came to this decision. There are several reports, obviously, that are there. The Petrotrin strategic plan, which we started off with, which we felt wasn't going far enough in terms of turning around the company. Hence the results of the Lashley report, which was a multidisciplinary team to evaluate Petrotrin's current financial position and to recommend plans for its restructuring. After that, there have been a lot of work going on to drill deeper into the data to determine what decision should be taken. Petrotrin recruited 2 internationally first-in-class consulting firms, Solomon & Associates and McKinsey Consultants Limited. I just want to say something about Solomon. It's the leading performance improvement company for the global energy sector. We all know that. McKinsey Consultant is a trusted advisor and counselor to many of the world's most influential businesses and institutions. We analyzed the data. The board presented the options to the cabinet. The cabinet accepted the preferred option of the board, and the decision was taken. With regards publishing some of the information and reports, the government will look at it seriously, but it's ultimately a decision of the cabinet.
Senator Mark.
Vice President, given the fact that we are all committed to transparency and accountability and full disclosure, and the government having taken the decision, can the Minister indicate whether the cabinet would be willing, as a matter of urgency, to table these reports so that the public can have a better appreciation of what informed the government's decision for that action. This is critical, Mr. Vice President. Can the Minister give this Senate an undertaking that the government will table those reports immediately?
Mr. Vice President, Senator Mark knows how our government operates.
He does.
I cannot speak on behalf of the Cabinet. I said we are willing to consider, but ultimately it is a decision of the Cabinet. I am just one of 23 in the Cabinet. There's what 33, by the way.
Mr. Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate when he will report to this House, the Senate, on the government's consideration of our requests on behalf of the people to have all reports tabled in this Parliament? When will that take place?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, at the appropriate time.
Senator Mark, next question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice President. To the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport, can the Minister inform the Senate of the measures being taken to avoid the forceful eviction of the 15 homeowners who will be affected by the Curepe interchange project?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Mr. Vice President, the issue of land acquisition is being handled by the Legal Service Unit of the Ministry of Works and Transport and other government stakeholder agencies. The Ministry remains committed to complying with all of the provisions of the Land Acquisition Act in relation to the acquisition of properties for the construction of the Curepe interchange. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Can I ask the Honourable Minister what methods are being employed? Is it market-driven or is it compulsorily, let's say, acquisition in accordance with the law? Or is it a combination of both? Can you explain to the Senate?
Minister.
Vice President, the approach is compulsory acquisition in accordance with the law of Trinidad and Tobago. And if Senator Mark understands the term of compulsory acquisition, it does have an element of market value included in it. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate whether there is discrimination or special treatment being given out to some of the persons or organizations that are supposed to be evicted and others are receiving separate treatment? Can you explain to us?
Senator, I'm not going to allow that question. Yes.
Okay. To the Honourable Minister of Public Utilities, who is now in the final line. In light of the severe disruption in the supply of potable water in the east-west corridor over the past 24 hours, negatively impacting hospitals, schools, and several thousands of citizens, can the Minister advise what urgent steps are being taken to restore the supply of water?
Minister of Public Utilities.
Mr. Vice President, the disruption in the water supply which affected the citizens of the East-West Corridor, along the East-West Corridor, was as a result of a leak along the main transmission line bringing water from the Caroni Water Treatment Plant to Port of Spain.
Mr. President, may I ask through you whether I could ask the Honourable Leader of the House, in light of the fact that we have two other questions, whether he would be willing to accommodate an extension of time for this exercise?
Leader of Government Business.
That is no.
Continue, Minister of Public Utilities. Finish your response.
Yes, as I was saying, the main transmission line bringing water from the Caroni Water Treatment Plant to Port of Spain. As you are aware, that particular line is the one that is responsible for bringing close to 35 million gallons of water from Caroni to Port of Spain, and as such, when you have problems among that transmission line, it will have serious disruption. This particular problem, the fixing of this particular problem started from around Sunday the 9th. However, the line that was actually ruptured was around 15 to 16 feet below, and it took a lot of work to actually get to the line, excavation work, and then of course you had to stop 35 million gallons of water from coming to Port of Spain. As a result of that, the actual work to repair the line the actual welding of the line didn't happen until about 6 a.m. this morning. The people from WASA, of course, have been working since Sunday to have that matter resolved. And I'm pleased to advise that by 8:30, the welding work was finished. We have actually started water to come through the line as we speak. That will take some time before you build up the pressure. The first set of water coming through the line, of course, will be dirty with sediments and so forth. However, we expect that within the next 2 to 3 hours, a lot of water, more water will come through, and we expect at least by this evening, we will have full restoration of the problem. Of course, during that time, I want to also thank...
I think the time for responding to urgent questions itself in its entirety is up, as well as the time for response. Thank you.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the government is pleased to announce that it will be answering questions number 155, 167, 168, 183, 194, 195. We ask for a deferral of questions 169, 187, and 196.
Sorry, last one, 190?
196.
I didn't get, Mr. Vice President, is it next week? You'll be on the next, is it?
We asked for deferral of 2 weeks.
You object, sir?
1 second. Honourable members, questions 169, 187, and 196 would be deferred for 2 weeks. Senator Mark, question number 155.
Mr. Vice President, we object. No, object to deferring any questions here. Mr. Vice President, I address you. Lazy government. Mr. Vice President, question 155 to the Honorable Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the water taxi vessels, the MV Sue, 8C Oliver, 8C Katia, and the 8C Melancia are not in service over the period March 2012 to June 2012, in accordance with the approval of the Cabinet, July 2010 to February 2011 and June 2012, NIDCO, through an international broker, took the necessary steps to sell the vessel to parties approved by its Board of Commissioners. However, in August 2012, Cabinet rescinded the decision that NIDCO sell the fleet of the second-hand vessels and directed that the Ministry of Transport at that time enter into a contract with the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago to provide this service for another international shipping broker to value the vessels and sell them at a minimum price to be set on the basis of evaluation. Evaluation was also done by the Maritime Service Division. In January 2013, a power of attorney was executed and given to the Port Authority to sell or otherwise divest the vessels. Since that time, several attempts by the Port Authority to engage a broker to sell the vessels were unsuccessful. Additionally, over the period, NIDCO has also referred potential buyers to the Port Authority. However, to date, the vessels have not been sold and remain vested for sale at the Port Authority. They remain moored in Chagaramas. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate what is the value attached or provided to the government for the sale of these 4 vessels? What is the value?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. There is no current valuation available. However, the Port Authority will be going out again to advertise these vessels for sale, and before that is done, a valuation will be done. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Minister indicate to this House when this exercise of a new evaluation will be conducted by his ministry?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, as I indicated, the Port Authority will be making another attempt to sell these vessels. These vessels will be sold in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Port Authority, and a valuation will be done prior to that happening.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate whether the government intends to conduct a forensic audit into these vessels, both their acquisition and the fact that they never sailed during the period of purchase? Is the government committed to conducting a forensic audit into the purchase or acquisition of these vessels? Can I ask the Honourable Minister?
Senator, I won't allow that question. Do you have another supplementary on this question?
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate whether there is any possibility of these vessels, given, for instance, reports that they have received, ever being returned to service so that we can use them for the water taxi purposes between Port of Spain and San Fernando? Is there any possibility at all?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, the answer I gave just now indicated that clearly in 2012 and 2013, the previous government, to which Senator Mark was a member of, offered these vessels for sale. I would judge from that they saw then the rules, the guidelines that these vessels should not be put back in service, hence why they put it for sale in 2012 and 2013.
Senator Mark.
Would you not agree with me, Honourable Minister, through you, Mr. Vice President?
Senator Mark, it's the next question. You've had 4 supplementaries on question number 155, question number 167.
I'm guided by you, sir. Question number 167 to the Honourable Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Appointments to senior management positions of the University of the West Indies are approved by the University Council at its annual business session meeting. The University Council consists of the Chancellor, the Vice-Chancellor, the Chairman of the Campus Council, the Pro-Vice-Chancellors, the campus principals, members of the academic board, representatives of the Guild of Graduates, and 1 student from each campus. The Chancellor also appoints persons of high international, regional, and national standing from the professions, commerce, industry, the public service, the labor movement, and other non-governmental organizations. The Council also consists of 1 member appointed by the government of each of the contributing countries. This Minister of Education is the government of Trinidad and Tobago's representative on the Council of the University of the West Indies. The meeting of the University Council is held once a year and appointments to senior management positions of the university is one of several issues discussed at the meeting. No documentation is circulated regarding these appointments before the meeting, and therefore no prior information was given in respect of the person recommended by the university for approval by the council to fill the position of campus registrar at the St. Augustine campus. Recognizing that the person being recommended was a member of the teaching profession and an employee of the Ministry of Education, it was felt that as a matter of courtesy, the ministry should have at least been consulted regarding the recommendation. Members of the council agreed that because it was an appointment to a senior management position at a landed campus, the government of the host campus should have been consulted, as obtains in other affairs of work and business. In light of other deliberations which ensued at the meeting, the University Council, not the government of Trinidad and Tobago, agreed not to approve the person recommended to it for the position of campus registrar at the St. Augustine campus. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, having regard to what we have been advised and told by the minister, that there is need for consultation involving an employee of his ministry, and having been aware of this development, can the minister indicate whether the post, as far as he's aware, has been re-advertised for campus, for a registrar of campus, or the campus registrar?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, I am not aware that the post was re-advertised, but I know that is the directive that was given to the principal of the St. Augustine campus. But at this point, I cannot say that it has been re-advertised or not. I don't have that information.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can I ask the Honourable Minister, since he arrived on the compound of the Ministry of Education in his capacity, is it an established policy that if a citizen of this country applies for a job at a university, that the ministry must be consulted? And if the ministry is not consulted, then the ministry reserves the right to so advise the campus, that is the university, that it must be consulted. Is there an established policy on this matter, or is it one that was made up?
I won't allow that question. Next question, Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, the people are asking what role did the Minister of Education played in denying a citizen the right of upward mobility in this society to the post of campus registrar. What role did he, Honourable Minister, play in personally stopping the upward mobility of a citizen who had all the qualifications of becoming campus registrar? What was his role?
You won't allow that question as well. Next supplemental, if you have it, Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate whether there is an official policy on the issue of consultation with the ministry whenever teachers are applying for appointments outside of the teaching service? Can I ask the minister this?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I am sure that Senator Mark knows about convention, he knows about practice, he knows about policy. And also, and although we don't have any written policy, it is settled practice that someone who applies for a position of that nature, being a member of any organization, that organization should be consulted. It is common courtesy. And that was the position that was taken when I addressed the council, and that position was accepted by the University Council. Thank you very much.
Next question, Senator Mark.
Question number 168 to the Honourable Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. The family that lost its home in a fire in Cedrus on April 23, 2018, was provided with a household items grant of $9,991 and 5 grants for clothing and school supplies of $1,000 each. Members of the family have also submitted application for grants for minor house repairs, electrical house wiring, and sanitary plumbing. However, the documents required to complete the process remain outstanding. Counseling services were also offered by the National Family Services Division of the Ministry and remain available to the family. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, can the Honourable Minister indicate whether these counseling services were taken up by the affected residents?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, to date, the family have not accessed those services, but it remains available to them.
Senator Mark.
The Honourable Minister, how are these services, counseling services, made available to those residents? Have they been written to? Did somebody approach them? Could you share with us what is the method or the means or the avenues available for counseling services? Mr. Vice President?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, officers of the National Family Services Division visited the family and in discussions with them would have indicated all the services provided, it would have been offered, and it is now up to the family to access those services.
Senator Mark or Senator Amin.
A supplemental question for the information of the public. Can you state what are the types of documents that are required, which you indicate would be outstanding, if these are documents that may have been lost in the fire, so that makes it impossible for them to provide to the ministry?
Senator Amin, I wouldn't allow that question. Do you have another one? Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, may I ask the Honourable Minister, are you satisfied with the rapidity and speed in which the ministry and its officers were able to respond to the needs of these persons who suffered the dislocation that the question raised?
I won't allow that question. Senator Mark, next question.
Okay. Anyway, I was getting a distraction here, but I understand he has now come out from leave, so let me leave him on it. Please.
Sorry, 183. Senator Obika, actually Senator Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I was taken aback by having documents after your house burned down. Question 183 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the Chatham Government Primary School, located at number 1 South Beach Road, Chatham, is 79% completed. Work on the facility has been suspended by the contractor and the consultant due to non-payment of invoices. The Ministry of Education has made some headway in paying of the arrears, but has exhausted the allocation in the 2018 estimates of expenditure for this school. As a result, the Ministry is actively seeking additional funding to settle the outstanding payments for this school. The Ministry of Planning and Development, along with the Ministry of Education, has been liaising with contractors and the consultants in an attempt to continue this project, along with several other similar projects. However, it is clear that construction work on this school will recommence only when outstanding payments are made. In the circumstances, Mr. Vice President, every effort is being made to ensure that students have access to a quality education in the interim, while arrangements are being made to source the required funds to restart the project. Thank you very much.
Senator Baker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. The Honourable Minister stated that work will recommence. Can he inform the public when was work last done on the school?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, from my recollection, the last occasion when work was done on the school was in 2017, when the contractor and the consultant left the project because of non-payment. So it is a little more than a year since last work was done on the school.
Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Could the Honourable Minister indicate, because he mentioned that the students will be getting quality education, where the students are being housed at the moment?
Minister.
Mr. Vice President, the question is whether the new Chatham Government Primary School will be completed. Obviously, it's a new school that has been built. And since it's a new school, there's an existing school. And there's where the students are being housed. I thought that Senator Baker would have known that by the nature of his question himself. Mr. Vice President, I'm very saddened as a teacher. I'm very saddened.
Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I share the Minister's grief because there's a shortage of school places in Point Fortin, and that is why the school had to be built. So he needs to inform himself, really. But what I want to find out is what will happen with this shortage of school places, given the lack of completion at Chatham. Because persons can't find places for their children. We have the Fanny Village problem, we have the Chatham problem. Whether the shortage of school places, where are they being housed, if it is up to standard, if there are any challenges there. This is an opportunity for the Minister to correct the record and inform the public.
I think you've asked the question, and secondary to that, I won't allow that question. Do you have another question?
Okay, let me rephrase. The question in effect would be, given the current accommodation of the children at the Chatham, with the Chatham children, is the Minister satisfied with that accommodation?
Again, I won't allow that particular question. Next question on the order paper, question number 194, Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Question 194 to the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. With regards to the question asked, 20 applications were received for financial assistance for Eid 2018, and funding was approved for 19 organizations. The breakdown of the amounts are as follows. Azure, $288,750. TML, $183,750. TIA, $131,250. Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, $115,500. Ahmadiyya Anjuman, $115,500. Islamic Missionaries Guild, $57,750. Darul Uloom Trinidad and Tobago, $63,000. Islamic Resource Society, $57,750. Islamic Relief Center, $57,750. Barakpur Islamic Center, $57,750. ASWJI, $63,000. Islamic Ladies Social and Cultural Association, $52,500. IDM, $63,000. The Baraka Foundation, $225,000. Takaful TNT Friendly Society, $10,000. Keep Helping All Needs, $2,500. Royal Society of Al-Kalam Writers, $4,000. Islamic Health and Social Association Network, $2,500. Montrose Muslim Association, $2,000. Grand total, $1,553,250.
Senator Hussain.
Can the Minister just indicate whether or not all of these organizations have received all the funding so far?
Minister.
To the best of my knowledge, the organizations have been contacted and funding, if not received, should be received imminently.
Senator Hussain.
Can the Minister give a time frame in which these payments will be made to these organizations?
Minister.
If funding has not been received, it will be received imminently.
That's it. Next question. No. No, that's it. Go ahead. You have another question, supplementary, Senator Hussain? Question 195, yes.
Yes. Question 195 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the Commissioner of Police has indicated that an investigation was launched on June 12, 2018 by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Professional Standards Bureau. An interim report was received by the Commissioner of Police with recommendations for the police officers to be suspended. The Commissioner of Police has since acted on those recommendations. The 2 officers were suspended pending the finalization of the report on the conclusion of the investigation. Mr. Vice President, as those in this chamber would be aware, one cannot give the outcome or what the findings are of the investigation because it may prejudice any proceedings that need to be taken. And in any event, at this stage, there are interim findings that are being finalized.
Senator Hussain? No?
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Senator Haynes?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I hereby seek leave to move the adjournment of the Senate today under Standing Order 16 for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance. That is, the failure of the government to take necessary steps to address the continued increase in homicides and serious crime in particular. The increase in attacks upon our young persons and women, which has resulted in a breakdown in the law and order in our country. The matter is definite because it relates to the failure by the government to discharge its most important duty of ensuring the safety and security of our citizens by addressing the continued loss of life through the unprecedented increase in homicides within recent times. The matter is definite because for 2018 so far, more than 370 persons have lost their lives, with no less than 5 murders taking place over the past weekend. The matter is urgent because the criminals are becoming braver and more brazen in their attacks upon our citizens, with criminals reportedly posing openly as law enforcement officers, leaving citizens gripped in fear and eroding their trustworthiness of the protective service personnel in uniform. It is also urgent because during the past week, as a country, we have witnessed the re-emergence of kidnapping for ransom. Our young women are going missing almost every day, and their mutilated bodies left decomposing indiscriminately across the country. The matter is of public importance because the lives of our citizens are at greater risk each day, and with each passing moment, our country is becoming more and more unsafe. It is of public importance because crime affects each and every one of us, and the loss of our country by the loss of life cannot be quantified. It is also of public importance because our country has become numb to crime in all its forms. The value placed on human life has never been so low, and as a parliament, we have a sworn duty to address the issues that affect the citizens of our country. I thank you.
Honourable Senators, I have considered the motion of the Senator, and I am not satisfied that this matter as presented qualified under this standing order. Senator Ramdeen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I seek your leave to move the adjournment of the Senate today under Standing Order 16 for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance. That is the decision by the government to close the Petrotrin refinery without providing the workers and the people of this country with a definite plan of how this decision will be implemented and how the government intends to counter the necessary adverse consequences. The matter is definite because it pertains specifically to the decision of the government to close the Petrotrin oil refinery at Pointe-à-Pierre. The matter is also definite because it relates specifically to the failure of the government to provide a plan for the implementation of this decision that will directly affect a large number of workers that are presently employed at the refinery and the specific communities of Gasparillo, Claxton Bay and Marabella and the nation as a whole. The matter is urgent because the government has fixed a date for the closure of the refinery that is less than a month away. It is urgent because a large number of workers will lose their jobs, and the government has not indicated the particulars of any severance packages that these employees will be entitled to. The government has not informed these workers of the plans that will be put in place to cushion the financial hardship that they will be forced to endure. The matter is of public importance because this decision will have adverse effects upon the economy of our country and upon the lives of all citizens directly and indirectly affected by this decision. It will have contagion effects on the financial system. Petrotrin is the sole supplier of fuel to domestic and commercial users of vehicles in our country. It also supplies the aviation and marine sector with fuel, and the risk that is posed by the refinery being shut down without a contingency plan is unimaginable. The government is under a duty to make full disclosure to the citizens of this country on the decision to close the Petrotrin refinery.
Honourable Senators, I have considered the motion of the Senator, and I am satisfied that this matter qualifies to be raised as a definite matter of urgent public importance. This matter also requires the leave of the Senate. Is the Senate prepared to grant leave? Yes. Honourable Senators, leave having been granted in accordance with Standing Order 16.5, the debate on this motion will stand over until 6 p.m.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, having regard to the interim report of the Joint Select Committee established to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018, third session 2017-2018 11th Parliament, I beg to move that the committee be granted an extension to September 26, 2018 to complete its work and submit a final report.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the Joint Select Committee established to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018, third session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, be granted an extension to September 26, 2018 to complete its work and submit a final report. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Public Business, Government Business Bill, second reading.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I recall starting on the last occasion this bill, or was it the other one? And if so, may I inquire the full time speaking?
The bill that is before us is the payment into courts bill. So you have not moved that one yet.
Much obliged. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It gives me great pleasure to pilot today the bill before us. I don't have a speaking note from the Parliament, so Mr. Vice President, permit me. I beg to move that an act to make provision for payments into and out of court be made electronically and into and out of custodial bank account in the name of the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago and for related matters be now read a second time. Mr. Vice President, Trinidad and Tobago is wrestling with a drive towards modernization of systems and procedures. Our laws, which have stood on the books of Trinidad and Tobago and which have been very useful in terms of the management of accountability and ease of doing business, have specifically not kept abreast with technology. This is demonstrated by the division in efficiency between the public sector and the private sector. The private sector obviously is unshackled from the strictures of the public service regulations and other laws which guide the payment of monies into and out of various accounts of the government for necessary purpose. But in the government sector, it has resulted in the fact that we are a manual system which is devoid from the ability to move electronic transactions into the public service. Now, the fact is that the judiciary of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is a separate arm, if one were to call that from a constitutional consideration perspective. But it is quite properly an aspect of state. So it is not true to say that the judiciary itself is devoid from the state. There is well-known provision that the judiciary is not liable, that there is no state liability in respect of matters which are the subject of judicial function. In the larger sense, obviously there are exceptions that can apply in the magistracy in particular, where rules of indemnity don't apply. But the fact is that the processes of the state are open to inspection. And that was most recently confirmed in the Privy Council in the case of Curvec Management and Consulting Services Limited versus the Attorney General, which is a Privy Council decision of 2002, to be found at 2002 UK PC at 43. The fact is, Mr. Vice President, that this bill, in its short number of clauses, all of 15 clauses and 3 parts, proposes to facilitate the making of payments into and out of court. And before I get to the specific clauses of the bill, permit me to paint the backdrop and the system in which this bill is grounded. The first and most important law that we look at is, of course, the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Specifically, Section 112 of the Constitution, that is 112 of the Constitution, provides subsections 1, 3, and 4, subsection 1, all revenues or other monies raised or received by Trinidad and Tobago, not being revenues or other monies payable under this Constitution or any other law into some other public fund established for a specific purpose, shall, unless payment otherwise provides, Parliament otherwise provides, be paid into and from one consolidated fund. What does that mean? Section 112(1) of the Constitution says, Parliament must say when monies, be they revenues or other monies, Parliament must say in an Act of Parliament where monies are to be paid into and out of. Subsection 3, no monies shall be withdrawn, this is the out of, from any public fund other than the consolidated fund, unless the issue of those monies has been authorized by an act. Subsection 4, no monies shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund or any other public fund except in the manner prescribed. And prescribed is obviously a reference to the fact that rules and regulations or subsidiary law to acts of Parliament can tell you how you treat with that. So that's the Constitution. Section 5 of this bill starts off by permitting, under the Part 2 of the bill, Section 5 provides under Part 2 for the making of payments into and out of court by saying a custodial bank account may be held in the name of the judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago at a commercial bank or other bank in Trinidad and Tobago to facilitate receipt and payment of maintenance payments, fees payable to the court, fines payable by law, and any other payments which are payable into court by order of the court, law, or rules of court. That, Mr. Vice President, is the crux of what the bill intends to do. Section 5 is the operational aspect of the bill. I do propose to tidy up some language in Section 5 to address some comments that we've received in the period of time that we've allowed for this bill to settle into the public domain, and I'll come to that shortly when I go through the specific clauses. But suffice it to say, the need for this bill starts off with the Constitution. Secondly, as a matter of fact and as a matter of law, we had the Electronic Transactions Act brought to us for certain payment mechanisms in 2011 by the previous government. That operationalization of the Electronic Transactions Act is something which is in the process of being worked out by the World Bank consultancy team that is progressing across a whole of government arrangement. The next law, which applies very importantly, is the Exchequer and Audit Act. The Exchequer and Audit Act, Mr. Vice President, is Chapter 6901. It is now 59 years old. It is an Act of Parliament number 20 of 1959. And very importantly, in 2014, an amendment to the Exchequer and Audit Act was brought. It is now the inclusion of Part 4A of that law, entitled Electronic Funds Transfer, where Sections 23A and 23B were put in. And specifically it says, 23A1, notwithstanding any other written law, payment into or issue out of the Exchequer account or other public monies, howsoever held, may be made by electronic funds transfer in accordance with general or specific directions issued by the Treasury. The Treasury is defined as the Minister of Finance. Nothing in subsection 1 shall affect the validity of making payments or issues referred to in that subsection by any means that were lawful before the coming into force of this part. So there was the law prior, which was specifically preserved. 23B provides that the minister may make regulations, that is, the Minister of Finance may make regulations wearing the capacity hat as Treasury, to give effect to the provisions of this part, and then it goes through conditions relating to electronic funds, processes, environmental application controls, guidelines controls, liabilities of the state, importantly. Regulations shall be subject to negative resolution of the Parliament. And again, there is the preserving of existing functionality where, notwithstanding any other written law, regulations, etc., we go on to make an exception to the application of Section 66 of the Interpretation Act to bump up fines. Very importantly, department in the Exchequer and Audit Act is defined as including the Court of Appeal, the High Court, the Industrial Court, the Tax Appeal Board, or any court of summary jurisdiction. Now, I say that because an obvious question would be, why do we need this Act of Parliament if we have Part 4A of the Exchequer and Audit Act, which was brought in 2014, where we have department including a broad range of courts of superior record, because the Tax Appeal Board, the other courts are included there, the Industrial Court. And the answer to that is because the regulations which were promulgated specifically in support of this, which came into effect in 2015, the Exchequer and Audit Electronic Funds Transfer Regulations 2015, those regulations are broad-based regulations, and what we seek to do today is to treat only with the jurisdiction of the courts in the traditional sense, meaning the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago, that is the Court of Appeal and the High Court, and courts of summary jurisdiction, meaning the magistracy. We do not propose on this occasion to treat with courts of superior record, meaning the Tax Appeal Board and the Industrial Court at this point. And that's a very important point as to why this bill is required in this construction. Now, Mr. Vice President, the fact is that the regulations governing the Exchequer and Audit Act are regulations standing from 1975. They're now 53 years old. Sorry, 1965. They are now, the Act is 59 years old and the regulations are 53 years old, coming from 1965. In the regulations, Mr. Vice President, attached to the Exchequer and Audit Act, it's quite interesting to note that there is great provision for the capacities of how you appoint accounting officers, duties of accounting officers, their liability, where they have disagreements with ministers, accounting officers answerable to the Public Accounts Committee, etc. But these regulations talk about things like strong box and impressed and are grounded squarely in things which include cash management, voucher books, line items. I'm sure that Senator Crease knows well what I'm saying, having served as a permanent secretary himself in the departments of government, where you deal with a vote book and you write down these things in a manual arrears fashion. It's very labor intensive, but open to liability and open to fraud and open to issues of corruption, Mr. Vice President. Because as we know from the Public Accounts Committee and the Auditor General's reports, we are getting reports in this Parliament dated 1998, dated 2002, 2003. Reports are too far in arrears to make any meaningful sense in terms of the auditing cycles as they exist under Section 116 with the Auditor General's capacity of the Constitution. Now, Mr. Vice President, this bill proposes that we establish essentially for the Supreme Court, for the magistracy, the ability to open custodial accounts. We're in effect allowing the judiciary of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, through its accounting officer, which is the court executive administrator, so created as a post in 1998 by my learned colleagues opposite when they were in government then. In fact, created then as a contract position. It was migrated to a permanent position under the JLSC's second schedule in 2003 by a then PNM government. But that executive court administrator, who is the permanent secretary, falling under the provisions of the Exchequer and Audit Act as the accounting officer with personal liability and with the grant of warrant from the Treasury, meaning Ministry of Finance, that executive court administrator is the functionality cog inside of this rubric. So let's get into some of the dynamics of what is involved, what is the type of money. Let's then go to what the commentary in relation to this bill has focused on, and in particular the commentary coming from the Law Association in its communications, which I'm sure many of my colleagues today will speak to, as that has been a sensible amount of contribution, which is quite easily answered, because regrettably much of the commentary by the Law Association is premised on false premises. The facts are just simply wrong in some of the equations, but there have also been some meaningful points that they have raised and which we propose to bring about by way of proposed amendments to the bill. So, Mr. Vice President, permit me to say that there are in fact 8 pieces of law and 1 rule that apply to this bill. This bill covers and coordinates with 8 other pieces of law and 1 rule, meaning specifically the rules of court. We are also obliged to consider what the funds that the judiciary will be managing or coordinating will involve. So let's start with funds. Funds which are classified may be of 2 types: revenue or non-revenue. In the revenue aspect, courts deal with 3 things which are categorized as revenue: marshal's fees, which come about under the Bailiffs Act, fines, filing fees. Those are the 3 subcategories of what the court treats with and which are determined at law to stand as revenue. Government revenue in the context of our constitution and our rules that the Ministry of Finance is governed by. Funds which are deemed non-revenue are maintenance payments, compensation payments, payments into court to encourage settlement of matters, and security for costs. Those are things which belong to someone else. Maintenance obviously is for the benefit of the person who is to receive the maintenance payment by an order of court. Compensation payments are that you shall pay damages to John Brown or Jane Brown and pay it into court. Payments into court to encourage settlement is where you pay the sum in court while you're negotiating, and then the court has a certain perspective on your bona fides and may treat you in a more favorable fashion if you do that. And then you have security for costs, which is a rule of law where persons are foreign to the jurisdiction and they may be absconding from the liabilities, and therefore costs may be an exposure. So that's non-revenue aspects. The 8 laws that coordinate with this bill are the Supreme Court of Judicature Act, Chapter 401, the Petty Civil Court Rules and the Petty Civil Court Act, so I'm categorizing those as one by itself, the Children's Act, Chapter 4601, the Attachment of Earnings Maintenance Act, Chapter 4552, the Age of Majority Act, Chapter 4606, the Family Law, Guardianship of Minors, Domicile and Maintenance Act, Chapter 4608, the Exchequer and Audit Act, obviously, Chapter 6901, the Family and Children Division Act, number 6 of 2016. And then the rule which applies importantly in this regard is, of course, the Civil Proceedings Rules 1998 as have been amended, and in particular Part 37 of that rule. That's the nature of funds. Those are the laws which articulate with this particular structure. Now, Mr. Vice President, what's interesting, and I thank the Law Association for its commentary, there would have been traded in the public domain correspondence passing back and forth between the President of the Law Association and myself, because it's a matter of public record, and the Law Association has commented on it, that the Office of the Attorney General has written to the Law Association on umpteen occasions, on almost umpteen bills, if I can put it that way. On many an occasion, we get no response, not an acknowledgement. We have recently had a new law association with a better enveloped system of structure, and I'm very grateful for the fact that they have been responding. We received some positions from the Law Association on this bill, and I wish to note that the Law Association wrote me, it was on the 29th of June when we were last sitting in the Senate, indicating that they wish to respond to issues which arose on this bill. Very importantly, they made an observation that, they made a statement of fact that the judiciary was not up to date on its accounts, which is a very strong statement of fact, and which I'm able to say now is entirely incorrect. The judiciary's accounts are 100% up to date, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will speak to that as we progress. But the Law Association asked for an opportunity to comment, and very importantly, I responded to them July 3rd, indicating that I would adjourn the consideration of this bill, bring it over to September's term as we are now, and treating with this law. We wrote to the Law Association on July 3rd, 2018. We had a response from them on July 6th. We wrote them again July 16th, asking them to provide us with comments. We wrote them again July 31st, asking them for comments. And on August 22nd, quite some time later, we received very useful comments coming from the Law Association, which I am now essentially to put onto the record. The Law Association, in their commentary, first of all, complimented the Office of the Attorney General and the government for seeking to introduce e-filing, which is a system which we have introduced by clause 13 of this bill. And then, whilst they said that they had no objection to clause 5 of the bill, which creates the custodial accounts, they went into a number of issues which it is incumbent to address as we go side by side with the fulminations of this bill. So permit me to jump to the considerations of the bill itself. Mr. Vice President, essentially, but I'll come to the nitty-gritty of the Law Association, they indicated that they were concerned that the judiciary is potentially dealing with large sums of money that will be deposited in the bank accounts. They then went on to say that rules of court should be made, that they assume that such mechanisms are intended to be put in place through the rules of court, which Rules Committee are empowered to make. They then went on to say that there should be a provision for separate accounts to be held if accounts are to be managed. They then drew a very strong criticism of the judiciary collecting fines. And they said that the powers doctrine dictates, the separation of powers doctrine, that fines should not be collected by the judiciary. And that, in fact, the clause which proposes that should be deleted. May I ask what time precisely I must end, sir?
End at 53.
Thank you. They then went on to indicate that they had deep concerns with the appointment of the Deputy Court Executive Administrator. They reflected upon the Criminal Division and Traffic Court Bill, repeating what they had to say about the Executive Court Administrator. And they said that the time was right now for us to speak to the terms and conditions and the relationship that the Executive Court Administrator has inside of the judiciary. And they contemplated, and they said specifically, that the Court Executive Administrator is now being put in charge of substantial sums of money, and they repeat that it is a need to regularize that. They went on to ask for the definition of court to be specific, and that is entirely agreeable. They said that the bill did not amend existing legislation, and they reflected upon the Supreme Court of Judicature Act and the Summary Courts Act in particular. They noted an inconsistency between the bill and the Family Law Guardianship of Minors Domicile Maintenance Act, and they asked for that to be cured. And that is in the round, the Law Association's commentary. So, Mr. Vice President, I'd like to reflect upon their submissions in the following fashion. First of all, Clause 1 of the bill is, of course, an entirely easy clause. It is just simply the short title of the bill. We propose, in fact, that we harmonize the long title with the short title, and we include the fact that the bill will be payments into and out of courts act, so we will, in fact, be making proposals. We have submitted, as a matter of fact, now onto the table, because we completed this exercise just last night, a draft version of the bill as it is proposed to be amended, together with proposed amendments, and that will be the first amendment that we propose to move. Clause 2 deals with the act coming into operation on a date to be fixed by proclamation. It's the proclamation clause. Clause 3, we have sought to harmonize some of the provisions that have been referenced. In particular, we note now, because of an amendment that we propose when we get down to a new clause 9A, where we identify every officer who is a receiver of revenue, we have included a definition here for a bailiff. That's to take care of the Petty Civil Courts Act. We have removed in our proposals, and we propose that Clause 3 be amended by removing the reference to central bank, because we're keeping the government's bank, the central bank, out of the equation and focusing simply upon financial intermediaries. And financial intermediaries are, of course, defined as financial institutions, as so described under the Financial Institutions Act, Chapter 7909, which is an Act of Parliament in 2008. We propose that court be amended to specifically treat with the categorization that we want, which is an exception to the Exchequer and Audit Act Part 4A, which I read out a bit earlier, which includes other courts of superior record. We're focusing in this bill only upon the Supreme Court, that's Court of Appeal, High Court, and the Magistracy, which is the Court of Summary Jurisdiction. And we deal now with the Court Administrator and the Court Executive Administrator. And I want to point out and address an issue that the Law Association has been raising. This bill does not and cannot and is not intended to treat with dealing with the functions of the Court Executive Administrator. The office of the Court Executive Administrator was created under the UNC government in 1998 by cabinet note, as they are entitled to do. It was a positive move in the right direction. It was created as a contract post. Of course, the CPO terms and conditions kick in there. The successor government, the PNM government, in 2003, brought another cabinet note, migrated that Court Executive Administrator to a permanent pensionable position, and caused an amendment to the second schedule of the Judicial Legal Services Commission legislation, specifically including the post in the second schedule there. That officer, under the Exchequer and Audit Act, has pecuniary liability as the warrant holder authorized by the Treasury in exactly the same fashion as every permanent secretary does. This position has existed for 20 years. In fact, court administration as a concept, albeit in a descriptive sense, was first introduced in the Freedom of Information Act in 1999, Act number 2202 of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, where Attorney General Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj then introduced the concept of court administration, because it is infradig to consider that the Chief Justice and the Chief Magistrate can have the capacity to run the administration of the judiciary, and every account and every note and position. The judiciary needed a permanent secretary, and that is exactly what the Court Executive Administrator is, just called by a different label. Because the judiciary, as an aspect of state, albeit in the Montesquieu principle, a third arm, the judiciary operates within the envelope of the state. But I want to point this out. the Deputy Executive Court Administrator, Court Executive Administrator, was also created in 1998 and in 2003. And that deputy, which people are now professing to have a problem with, that deputy has existed for 20 years as a contract officer. And why is that so? Number one, there is an incongruity in our constitutional arrangement where the Judicial and Legal Services Commission can only appoint people who are lawyers to positions. They don't deal with appointments of non-lawyers. That's for the Public Services Commission. But a non-lawyer who has skill in judicial administration, and there is a skill to that, if you go to the North American courts and the English courts, that non-lawyer can't just be plucked from the average public service where you migrate somebody from X ministry and you put them inside of there. The appointment of a Deputy Executive Court Administrator is done by an interview panel which is comprised of Chief Justice and 3 other judges, etc. And that has been the case for 20 years. The Cabinet is now considering an amendment to the Judicial and Legal Services formula where we propose to increase the Judicial and Legal Services Commission functionality to actually now allow for the appointment of judicial support officers, judicial research assistants, for the magistracy in particular, and also the Deputy Court Executive Administrator. But this functionality cannot be dealt with in this bill because this bill is intended to deal with electronic payments. And most respectfully, I must decline the opportunity presented by the arguments of the Law Association to commingle those matters. Because the amendment to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission is a constitutional amendment because it is entrenched in our Constitution. And that is a separate consultation and argument to be considered, not to be commingled with these purposes. Suffice it to say, I read out the provisions where the Exchequer and Audit Act says already, anything that you could have done prior to the 2014 amendment, which I read out, and the 2015 rules is still preserved. And the operationality of the Court Executive Administrator and the Deputy Court Executive Administrator are in fact preserved. We are not doing anything differently other than specifying the accountability that they are to have in an electronic environment. Mr. Vice President, we propose that custodial bank account be amended. We've harmonized to include the 2 types of accounts which you may have, revenue and non-revenue accounts. In Section 5, you'll see we propose an amendment where we describe the 2 separately. So we propose a small amendment there. We have removed financial institution and are relying on the terminology used, in fact, in the regulations, which is the financial intermediary. It is, in fact, a financial institution, but we must do it from a drafting purpose that way. We are saying that a receiver of revenue should be included because that's the terminology used. But let me deal with a further point because the Law Association's submission is a worthwhile one to treat with the argument of accountability. They offered this submission that the Deputy Executive Court Administrator would be beholden, all of a sudden, now, after 20 years of it operating. I accept that it's a genuine argument, but I'm saying it has existed for 20 years and must be treated with separately. They are saying this person will be beholden, and you can't have this person unless it's a public officer treating with that. Let me tell you what the law says, Mr. Vice President. The Exchequer and Audit Act, first of all, does not say that you have to be a public officer. It does not say that. It says the opposite. It in fact says in Section 3, etc. onward, specifically that any person can be appointed by the Treasury to handle money. That's basically what it says. But importantly, in the regulations, which are 1965-62 regulations, in Clause 20, Section 20 of the regulations, here's what Section 20 says. Section 20 says, the greatest possible care shall be taken in the selection of officers whose duties involve the handling of cash. That applies here, albeit in a different environment. These officers shall be permanent and pensionable officers, and where this is not possible, the prior approval of the Treasury shall be sought. And for 20 years, this Deputy Executive Court Administrator and Court Executive Administrator, just like in every ministry where we have two streams of permanent and contract. For 20 years, the Treasury has been giving specific approval for persons to act because there's accountability. It's subject to the Exchequer and Audit Act regulations, the Act itself, the financial regulations. It's subject to personal liability on the part of the person who's involved in that. And therefore, this argument, laudable argument that we ought to take care and caution to fix now this position of Deputy Court Executive Administrator, I say most respectfully, this is not the place to treat with that yet. That's in a separate constitutional structure, which we intend to bring shortly. But very importantly, the checks and balances of the regulations, that's the 1965 regulations, the Exchequer and Audit regulations, the Exchequer and Audit Act, the financial regulations that exist in the e-environment that we have in the 2015 regs. All of these things, Mr. Vice President, come as safeguards to the structures. Importantly, we say, let's add, and you will see it in a proposal that we make for the addition of a new section 4A, clause 4A into the bill. Let us expressly say the Exchequer and Audit Act shall apply to this Act, and in the event of a conflict between the Act and Exchequer and Audit Act, this Act shall prevail. Why are we saying that? First of all, that formula of words is to be found in umpteen laws. The Free Zones Act, Chapter 8107, the Banking and Insolvency Act, the Corporate Societies Act, the Anti-Dumping and Countervailing Duties Act. Specifically, we say that because we do not intend to treat with other courts of superior record right now. We want to confine it to this purpose. But we go further, Mr. Vice President, in proposals that we make in Clause 5 to the bill. We say in Clause 5, we propose that the bill, in fact, be amended by expressly providing custodial bank accounts shall be public accounts for the purpose of Section 116 of the Constitution. Public accounts. What does that mean? The Auditor General, a constitutional office, shall have the ability to audit these accounts. Let's take a pin for a moment. Law Association made a most startling submission that the judiciary should not be collecting fines. Mr. Vice President, the judiciary of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, prior to independence and post-independence from 1962 onwards, has been and will always be collecting fines. I found it startling that the Law Association could say, don't let the judiciary collect fines, that it is a breach of the separation of powers principle. I genuinely find it startling. And in fact, those accounts are labeled as fines accounts. That has been happening since prior to independence. And therefore, I take great caution in accepting some of the recommendations of some of my learned colleagues. Mr. Vice President, let me give you some of the stats. And I've circulated statistical information to honorable members. For the years 2017 to 2013 aggregated, the judiciary has collected fines, fees, and marshals' monies to the tune of $139,672,931.74. Nearly $140 million. But listen to the figure for maintenance alone, because that figure did not include maintenance. In the year 2016 to 17, the judiciary collected $119,867,451.93 in maintenance alone for 1 year. The current system is that this money is in a drawer, Mr. Vice President, in a drawer in the magistracy or in the district revenue offices, in a drawer.
But it's not there to spend.
And unless Senator Obika understands the concept of risk well enough, everyone else will surely understand that $140 million in a drawer in cash or in checks is not such a bright idea when electronic payments are an option. I think everybody else understands that. So, Mr. Vice President, what I am saying is this bill specifically intends to cause the creation of custodial accounts to be held in the name of the judiciary, subject to the public accounts perspective of Section 116 of the Constitution, allowing for public inspection, subjected to rules, but the Law Association in its commentary said that they want rules of court to treat with this. Again, false premise. It is not rules of court that are going to treat with this. It is the rules of the Minister of Finance as the Treasury under the Exchequer and Audit Act that are going to treat with this. Again, a basic understanding of the system was absent from the analysis, respectfully. And those rules, in fact, exist already in certain part, and we've honed them down, and there will be more rules to follow. But it is the Treasury that makes those rules, because the liability arrangement with the signatory, with the person, are to be treated with in that fashion. Importantly, Mr. Vice President, we say that there is merit in the submission of the Law Association, that we should keep accounts separate. We are proposing that we cause an amendment to the separation of accounts, that they must be labeled and kept separately, and you will see that in a proposal where we say that the accounts should be disaggregated in Clause 5. In Clause 6, notwithstanding the fact that we disagree with the submission of the Law Association as to the risk with the Deputy Executive Court Administrator, we said let's broaden it. And we propose now an amendment to add signatories to the categories of receiver of accounts and persons who are co-signatories, who are subsidiary officers. And you will see in Clause 6 that we're proposing to add as signatories, as receivers of accounts in 6A, the post of registrar and chief magistrate. And in the co-signatory aspect, we're proposing to add deputy registrar and marshal to the collection of persons there, including collecting officer, collector of revenue, those accounts and investment officers, etc. Those are all persons approved by the Treasury of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, that is Minister of Finance, pursuant to the Exchequer and Audit Act, which has existed for 69 years. And we are saying there that these people, having been vested with responsibility, also have liability, are subject to public scrutiny, are subject to the Auditor General's scrutiny, and we propose that that system be continued. We say, thanks, we say that payments into custodial accounts may be made electronically. And let me make this point. Electronic payments are voluntary. The voluntary aspects of the electronic payments are simple. It means that this is not a mandatory law. And it not being mandatory, I want to draw reference to something called court pay, because I heard a most spectacular submission by the Law Association, again, that court pay is something that is illegal. Let me explain this. Court pay is a judicial software system that was introduced in April of this year. And court pay came about by way of an operationality of a function called court pay. Introduced, a question was asked in this parliament. It cost a whole $75,000 to set up. It allows the unbankable to actually use debit and top-up cards at a lotto machine, etc., to receive maintenance payments that they would otherwise spend days in a line for at the magistracy to pick up maintenance payments. They can get it paid to them without the indignity of the sign flipping over and saying out to lunch, and you're watching somebody eat a sandwich in front of your face at 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And this court pay system, the Law Association said, was illegal. And I want to point out to the record and to Trinidad and Tobago, the Chief Justice issued a practice direction on May 18th, 2018 to treat with court pay. And court pay, Mr. Vice President, is not illegal. Number one, it was only in the family court, which is the High Court Division. Number two, it's not in the magistracy, which is still manual. And number three, it's a voluntary court order where persons are told, these are the fees and payments you're going to have to pay. Here is the clearinghouse fee. Here's the $5 fee. Here's the $20 fee. And it is scheduled in black and white. And persons are given a draft copy of what the order looks like. And I want to know if the Law Association submission is correct. How on earth could a court order ever be illegal when it's a voluntary consent order on the part of the participants into the litigation in the maintenance context? How could that be the case? Most respectfully. And I was annoyed to hear that submission made on television. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
giving way with only 5 minutes left. I just want to ask one quick question on that particular point, and that's why I interrupt you. When that money is paid, since pursuant to the practice direction that was issued by the Chief Justice, where is that money going? Sure. As we speak?
Sure. It goes to the persons who are charging the fee. So the $20 goes to the card, to the judiciary that issued the card, or the $5 to the automatic clearinghouse, etc. But it is no different from when a husband or a wife agrees to make a payment by standing order, because the bank charges a fee, and the standing order fee goes to the bank. And that's why I found it entirely exceptional that the Law Association could have had its members on television criticizing these orders, because it makes no sense, most respectfully. Mr. Vice President, the fact is, the bill is extremely important for the modernization of structures. We propose further in the bill simply to identify the persons who are treated within in the 8 laws and the CPR rules that I referred to in a new clause 9A. That is simply to deal with whether there's any inconsistency with any law that was not respected. We focus on the persons who can receive monies. We propose small amendments to clause 12, where we say, instead of the judiciary shall notify the recipient, we can't say the judiciary. Who is the judiciary? We must put the accounting officer, the court executive administrator, just like the PS would be involved. And we propose that, importantly, in an amendment to clause 14, that a court executive administrator may issue or cause to be issued prepaid cards. That clause is for every person that is unbankable in Trinidad and Tobago, who cannot open a bank account and who needs their maintenance payment or needs their positions followed, that they can have the dignity of accessing money other than in a line taking 2 days off from work. Importantly, in clause 13, we're proposing e-filing, Mr. Vice President. Now, Mr. Vice President, a note was passed to me a second ago saying that both from members of the independent bench and the opposition bench, that the amendments circulated are substantial. Mr. Vice President, I want to say this respectfully, and that there's time needed to consider this. This is no substantial amendment. Let's get it straight today. I have taken the role as Attorney General as an antithesis to what was given to me, in particular by a previous Attorney General, where they would spring amendments at you at committee stage, and you wouldn't know what was coming. And to make life easy, I circulate marked up revisions of what the law looks like. That has never been done in the Parliament. The CPC's department constantly tells me, AG, no predecessor of yours did that. But I treat the members of this House with dignity and with respect. And make your life easy, relatively speaking. I have 1 second. Make our lives a little bit easier for the purpose of this. Respectfully, I am convinced that there will be many speakers and that there will be a lot of time for reflection upon the proposed amendments. They are not hard amendments to follow. The questions can be answered in the course of the debate. Senator Roach, you wanted to ask a question?
What I wanted to add is that I did not comment on that. I don't think it's
No, sorry. The note that came to me said that there were expressions from some members, including the independent bench. I think Senator Mahabia, you may have expressed that, yes? Yes, Senator Mahabia expressed that we need to have time and that there are substantial amendments. And I'm urging now, in my piloting, so as not to interrupt him, to not take that point of view. Don't be frightened by the courtesy. The courtesy of circulating a draft amendment of the proposed bill is just to make it easy for us to read. They are very simple amendments that are going to be proposed. Mr. Vice President, this is good law. It's constitutional. It's proportional. It's designed to ease people's lives. It's designed to take away risk of hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, in drawers at various department offices. It is time that the judiciary and Trinidad and Tobago steps into the modern world and allows the transactionality through electronic environment to prevail, because it is safer, it is reliable, it can be double-checked. And as we get into things including blockchain technology, they become immutable transactions, which we can better find than a book which is lost by a magistracy clerk, or a book that is doctored by somebody, or a page that is torn out and you find no reference, as we see in every Auditor General's report year on year. I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, I shall now propose a question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled an act to make provision for payments into and out of court to be made electronically and into and out of a custodial bank account in the name of the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago and for related matters be now read a second time. Senator Mark, you want to make...
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, we expressed, and I want to indicate to you that I agree that the Attorney General has in fact provided this House with amendments, and he has tried in his own way to provide us with the kind of data and information. But we cannot be ambushed when we are dealing with the people's business here. Those of us, whether on the independent bench or otherwise, who have the time and they can deal with it, that is their business. What I can tell you is that for us, we are recommending for the consideration of the Attorney General and the government that we pause on this matter so the opposition bench can look at these substantive changes that have been put forward. And I ask Honourable Vice President that we probably can take an early lunch and resume maybe an hour and a half after so that we can give ourselves an opportunity to go through these amendments with a fine-tooth comb. It's a reasonable proposal. I'm suggesting, rather than say leave this until Thursday of this week, I'm saying that we are prepared to make some adjustments. But for myself, preparing for this debate, I prepared along the lines that the bill originally was sent to me. And therefore, these changes that came on us this morning, all I'm asking is for some time for us to reflect so that we can properly address these amendments when we are making our contribution respectively. So, Mr. Vice President, with your leave, either we can suspend alas, or secondly, we take an early lunch and we can have an opportunity to discuss the matter with the Leader of Government Business and my colleague on the independent bench.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Vice President, I just want to be very clear that Senator Mark is proposing an early lunch, and upon the resumption, we would continue with the debate. Is that? Senator Mark?
Yeah, I'm suggesting that whilst we take an early lunch, I'm suggesting that we would need at least an additional half an hour beyond the luncheon break. So I'm suggesting that if we normally take an hour, I'm suggesting an hour and a half so that we can look at these amendments and come back in time to properly prosecute them.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Vice President, the government would not object to an early lunch, an additional 15 minutes, and a resumption thereafter with the debate on the bill that is before the House.
Senator Mark, so agreeable?
Mr. Vice President, I don't understand why you're up. Mr. Vice President, I have made a reasonable proposal because I did not want to be very, very, very... I don't want to appear to be stymieing this whole process because that is not our business. But we have made a very reasonable proposal of half an hour after lunch. And therefore, I'm proposing 1.5, and we come back here.
Mark? I think I've gotten the gist of the discourse between the two leaders of the benches. I would just ask for input from the independent coordinator, if he has any input on this particular request.
Mr. Vice President, I am of the view that we do need some time, and I think if we could resume at around 1:30, we'd have enough time to look at the amendments proposed by the Honourable Attorney General.
Okay. All right, what I will do is just to come in the middle and acquiesce more to what the Leader of Government Business has asked for, I will suspend this House for an early lunch. We will now suspend for lunch and return at 1:15. This House is now suspended to 1:15 p.m.